All right, so I am going to read for this entire hour. I'm just going to read as far through the book as I can. Not really going to do that. I'm going to read to you from a couple of things, maybe 3 things. We'll see how it goes. Probably just 2. And I'm not going to read to you too long from any of them because I personally find it hard to focus when a reading goes super long. So first I'm going to read a little bit from Blackwood, which I know some of you have heard me read from before, and I'm sorry, nothing has changed. Once it's printed and bound, that's just the way it goes. So I'm going to read from the beginning, and I don't think you need any setup for this. Derek mentioned what it's about. And the only thing that I'm not reading here at the beginning, there's a little brief history of the unexplained that gives sort of the background of how this legend is usually told. I'm sure everybody here is familiar with Lost Colony of Roanoke Island. My publisher is based in England, and they publish the book here and there, and it turns out people in England don't know this story. Most of the readers that I have heard from that are English don't realize until the end that it is based on history, even though it's also their history. I guess they have a lot more than we do, so they're like, we don't really count that part. That really wasn't notable. We lose people all the time. We've been doing it for centuries, and so those is just like 114, we don't care. But anyway, this is set on modern-day Roanoke Island, and as you'll see, it sort of gives the history a little bit in the first chapter, so that's why I'm skipping the prologue. And it starts with an epigraph from Sir Walter Raleigh's petition to the Queen. For what we sometimes were, we are no more. Fortune has changed our shape, and destiny defaced to the very form we had before. Miranda. The first time Miranda Blackwood checked the back of her closet for a portal to another world, she was 11. That was the year her mother died. After the closet, she tried other places. She wandered small patches of woods, seeking doors hidden in twisted trees, and peered into mirrors, searching for reflections that weren't her own. But Miranda grew up. She no longer hoped to step over a secret threshold and leave Roanoke Island behind forever. Instead, she grabbed whatever escapes were in reach, no matter what they were, no matter that she stayed right here. For 3 summers running, her best escape had been interning for the Lost Colony at Waterside Theater. She sanded wood, hammered nails, sewed seams, and did whatever else needed doing to make the show's version of history, complete with musical numbers, come alive for the tourists. In exchange for those hours of scut work done without complaint, the stage manager, Polly, let Miranda join her at the side of the outdoor stage every night to watch the show's final scenes. The set's faux oak tree, hollow boulders, and packed dirt floor passed for an abandoned settlement, except for the shining spotlights. While Miranda half listened for her favorite part, she cocked her head back to take in the stars light years above. The view was as familiar to her as the small constellation of calluses dotting her palms, or as the lines of the play drawing to a close beside her. As familiar and as set as everything in Miranda's life. The season was almost over, and then she'd endure senior year. Everyone was talking about college, preparing for the next act in their lives. She wasn't going anywhere. She wouldn't even have this. After she graduated, it'd be time to get a year-round job that paid more bills. They survived. The bullish voice of the actor playing Governor John White snapped her attention back to the stage. The line signaled his return to the site of the colony after his trip to England. Surrounded by sailors, White gasped as he pointed at the oak on the far side of the stage, the simple cloak around his shoulders flying out with a gesture. Miranda couldn't see the word from where she stood, but the famous Croatoan was carved into the bark in desperate, crooked letters. White went on, overacting like crazy. My granddaughter, I will see her beautiful face. Miranda and Polly exchanged a look. Polly shook her head to prematurely gray ponytail Bobby. Director Jack, a.k.a. His Royal Majesty, would give the actor a scathing note on that later. The governor froze, along with the sailors in the background, and the lights dimmed. This cued up the final reveal. Miranda could never help wondering where the colonists had gone. Disappearing was some trick to pull off, even hundreds of years ago when there were more wild places left. The standard theories involved bad endings and tragedy. Even on such a humid night, not knowing that no one would ever know the truth was enough to give her a small shiver. A single low spotlight fixed on a solemn young blonde girl as she wandered ghost slow through the frozen men. Her face was chalk pale. His Royal Majesty's biggest change to this year's show had been making Virginia Dare the show's deadpan narrator. The actress, Carolyn, was a local kid, 7 years old and a mean girl in training, and yet the casting worked. Miranda leaned over to see how the scene was playing for the crowd. The show wasn't sold out, but the curving rows of the amphitheater were nearly full. Probably about 1,200 people, riveted and silent as Carolyn haunted the stage. The shadow appeared at the back of the audience. Miranda had no idea what it might be. It was definitely not part of the show, only that it was there. The large, unformed shape was simply a growing darkness until it resolved into an immense, old-fashioned black ship. The kind of ship used long ago by colonists and pirates. Strange gray symbols bloomed on each of 3 billowing black sails, the shapes a mix of straight lines and arcs, a half-moon curving above a circle at the top. The sailcloth rippled in a wind that she didn't feel on her skin. Miranda blinked. The ship was still there. She put her hand up, and her hand was in front of an immense black ship with tall gray sails, and the ship was moving forward now, swallowing row after row of the audience. In a few seconds, half the audience was gone beneath it, and Miranda's breath caught in her throat. The ship glided steadily closer. When she turned to Polly, the stage manager smiled at her with the normal relief of reaching the end of the night. She gave off no hint of concern. But the ship was heading straight toward the actors, those odd symbols shifting on the sails and curving and slashing lines. The black monster gathered speed, moving faster and faster. When Carolyn hit her mark at center stage, only a dozen feet separated her from the black ship. She gave no sign of seeing it either. She might be a brat, but she was also 7. Look. Miranda pointed and staggered forward onto the stage. Carolyn opened her mouth to speak, and Miranda threw herself at the girl, shielding her with her arms. There were a few shocked cries. Miranda closed her eyes and waited for the impact. And waited. There were more murmurs and questions from the crowd, but nothing else. Carolyn squirmed in her grasp, struggling. Miranda opened her eyes, and the massive curving prow loomed above her, unmoving, throwing a heavy shadow over her and Carolyn, and then, between one blink and the next, it vanished. The spotlight blared into Miranda's face, and she squinted, not used to the bright heat. She glanced over her shoulder, still holding the wriggling Carolyn tight. Governor White stared murder at her, but none of the men broke character. They were supposed to remain frozen until the lights came down, and they were. Carolyn said, "Let me go, Blackwood." Miranda didn't understand right away, didn't understand anything that had just happened. Carolyn yanked a handful of her hair out, and Miranda realized the spotlight was still on. That meant the show wasn't over. She'd interrupted the performance because a giant ship had appeared, a giant ship no one else seemed to have seen. From the side of the stage, Polly said, "Miranda, get over here." The knowledge that she disappointed Polly finally got her moving. She released her hold on Carolyn and hurried off stage. Polly grabbed her arm. What was that? Carolyn looked like an angry ghost, her face pink instead of white. Polly brushed at the sleeve of Miranda's shirt where the girl's makeup had rubbed off. "I'm so sorry," Miranda said. Polly frowned but stepped next to her to wait while rosy-cheeked Carolyn managed her last lines. The 114 men, women, and children of the Roanoke colony remained lost, their fate unknown, a mystery trapped in time. At last, the spotlight died. I was going to let you guys choose, but since that is a pretty short piece. All right, so you can choose. I might read from all 3, but I might decide that I've taken up too much time and people look sleepy and only read from 2. So I'm going to let you guys decide. I have a little section of The Woken Gods, which is my next book, the book that comes out in July. And I also have a little snippet of the book that I just sent to Jen on Tuesday evening, and which she has now read, that is not sold to anybody, but hopefully will be. And you get a little sneak peek of that book. So it involves a circus. So I'm gonna let you pick.
Circus.
All right. All right, so this is like not a first draft, but a second draft. And it's actually about 100 pages in. As we discussed earlier, I will be truncating the first part of the book before we submit it to publishers. So I picked from the first section that I think will remain relatively intact. The setup of this book is, it's about a girl whose family runs a one-ring circus out of Indiana, and they are a multi-generational circus family, as many circus families are, but they have fallen on hard times, can barely make a living, and at one time they were part of big circuses. And in this now, somebody who is essentially like a blend of a Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, but really made a fortune in tech, but is always been a circus aficionado, decides to resurrect the old tent circus, and so lures a bunch of the old families to come work for him, and she manages to get her family to agree to sign on. And I'm told by my friends that work in the tech industry that this is totally something that, like the kind of win that one of their billionaire people would do. But so the setup for this little section that I'm going to read is when Jules, who's the main character, Jules Maroney, gets there. She's a high wire walker. Her father is the best high wire walker in the world. She decides that she wants to try and remake her family's name, and she has a hero named Bird Millman, who's a real person in the circus, who was a wire walker and did building walks to raise war bonds in the 20s and 30s. And she decides that she wants to do the kind of Linda family circus walks, the stunt walks, you know, walking from building to building and that sort of thing, Philippe Petit kind of stuff. At the beginning of the circus parades when they come into town. And she's decided this a few days early, so they don't have a permit for this particular walk. So this will be the first walk that she does. It's on a bridge outside Jacksonville, and the circus is doing a circus parade across the bridge into downtown Jacksonville. I don't know if you guys have been to Jacksonville, but that's the setup. So we're going to pick up as she gets to the bridge and is about to go up. The bridge was painted a vibrant blue, a strong steel structure made up of crisscrossing beams that stretched in a long arc over the deeper blue waters of the St. Johns River, the two towers rising on either side of its middle section. The whole effect was of some giant's erector set. As we approached, the circus band arranged themselves at the back of the pack. They had brought the horn section and a portable drum along. When Thurston lifted his hand and signaled them, they began to play. The sound was bright, horns blazing. We surged forward onto the 4 lanes of pavement, blue metal beams crossing over our heads, a large chaotic group under control for the moment. The switch into performance mode was complete in a blink. Thurston shepherded me to the front of the pack. He was talking, but I wasn't absorbing a word he said. Someone jostled against my other side, and there was a tug at the low knot of my hair at the base of my neck, but when I turned, no one was anywhere near me. I caught Remy's eye over my shoulder, and he gave me a slight frown. I resisted the urge to stick out my tongue. Remy is from a rival circus family. He's a trapeze flyer. He's a hot trapeze flyer. As we planned earlier, Thurston and I sped into a jog to outdistance the others. They'd crawl along until I was in position and couldn't be stopped, the better to prevent any interruptions by the authorities. We stopped on the pavement below the first of the towers. The tower began well above the roadway, poised on the 16-foot metal ceiling of the bridge. The innards of the column above us were full of levers and cables, equipment for its actual purpose, to raise the entire middle section so tall ships could pass underneath. A nylon ladder the workmen had left for me dangled at eye level. There'd be a match to it on the opposite tower. And I'd be alone once I reached the top. The workmen, Thurston, my dad, they had no place in that part. That was all on me. Only then did I really stop and look up through the metal bars at the wire itself. I knew it hung at exactly 170 feet, attached to the bottom lip of the tower's top portion, instead of at the very top. The positioning would give me a little more insulation from the wind and would make just as jaw-dropping a visual to anyone watching from downtown. Thick braces punctuated the wire at 3 places, cavalettis with their guy lines clamped to the sides of the bridge below to keep the line stable. The wire was steady, with the slightest unavoidable sway from the wind and the length of it. I just had to be steady, too. My PR team is the best in the country, Thurston said. You're going up Julietta Maroney, but you'll come down one of our biggest stars. Cotton ball clouds drifted in a blue, nearly windless sky, and the sun shining through the gaps in the structure traced a dappled pattern over the pavement, my arms, my face. You know just what a girl wants to hear. No use telling him I was more interested in how the people here treated us after this than how the audience did. I took a breath and motioned for Thurston to give me a boost. He lifted me at the waist, and I grabbed hold of the highest rung I could reach, pulling up until my feet found the bottom rung. While I climbed, I concentrated on trying to find the calm place inside. It was a long way, and I listened as the front of the parade passed beneath me, the thin nylon rungs straining against my fingers. Finally, I levered myself onto the flat lip of the ledge. I shook out the stiffness in my hands and did my best to shake off the tension. The moment of no turning back. I reached down and unclipped the edges of the ladder, letting it fall to the waiting arms below. Needless to say, the platform hadn't been constructed for a picnic. I was cautious as I walked to where my balance pole lay, nestled inside a metal lip along the back. Dad had also left me a towel and gym chalk. I recoated my palms and the soles of my feet, dusted the bottoms of my slippers clean with the towel before I put them back on. Then I hefted the long pole carefully, letting my arms become accustomed to the weight. The ends nearly touched the barred walls on either side of the platform. I didn't usually use a pole, of course, but for a walk this high, it was pretty much a requirement. This one was standard size, 20 feet long and 40 pounds. That might sound too long or too heavy, but those are things that provide extra stability. I wasn't Bird, able to do this with a parasol and a smile. I eased back to the edge of the platform, directly in front of the wire. The joyfully blaring horn section passed below. They nearly drowned out the shouting, which I'm sure was their intention. I caught sight of Thurston arguing with a police officer. The cop gestured angrily up to me, yelling, "You, up there, you, stop." There was nothing for me to do about that, except hurry. Still, I took a moment to mess around with my grip on the pole, shifting my palms an inch this way, an inch that, until it felt solid, until my center of balance did too. Only then did I examine the flat horizon in front of me, the one I intended to walk. The world usually seems small from high on the wire, but from that height it seemed enormous, like it could swallow me in an instant. The increasing volume of the shouts below told me it was time. It was now or not at all. Once I got out on the wire, we didn't have to worry about cops interrupting. We didn't have to worry that I'd turned chicken. One more breath, and I took my first step, letting my foot learn the feel of this wire, and then slowly, slowly, I placed my other foot in front of it, lightly, lightly, as a butterfly. I moved forward, the platform left behind. One step and another, and another. Everything faded into the background except the weight of the pole, the easy sigh of the wind, the nothing scent of the air, and my feet, one in front of the other, one in front of the other, smooth and steady. There was no skyline, no tall buildings reflecting light beyond, no river waiting below, no choppy blue crests, no clouds, no birds, no music, no nerves. There was nothing but the wire fixed to another Lego blue platform, one I had to reach by going steady and smooth, smooth and steady. And that was how it went. Me feeling like time had vanished, that the only thing that marked the passing seconds was my forward movement, my progress toward the other side. The walk was going exactly as planned. And the bigness of the moment surrounded me. I was doing this. I was doing this. I'd reached the home stretch, a good 2/3 of the way across, when I noticed the slight tremble in my arms. It wasn't the pole's weight. Sure, it was heavy, and I didn't practice with it that often, but I was strong enough to hold it, and there shouldn't have been a problem. A rivulet of sweat ran down my forehead, dripped into my eye. I blinked at the burn, and I paused. I stopped where I was, and the tremble became all I could notice, except the sweat and the wild pounding of my heart. The wire under my feet was still sable, but I didn't feel so calm anymore. I shifted my focus away from the platform. I made a mistake. I looked down, and everything swam for a moment like a picture coming into and out of focus. It's not like you can take a break in the middle of a high wire walk 200 feet above a river and not risk freaking people out, but I had to do it anyway. Breathing the dizziness away, I made sure my back foot was stable. I couldn't slip. Once I was sure of it, I picked up my other foot and held it off the wire an inch, maybe two. Then I bent the leg I still stood on, dangling the foot that was already off the wire. I resisted tightening my grip on the pole as I lowered myself to a crouch. I eased my thigh onto the wire, knee bent at a slight angle, and rested there for a moment. My head felt woozy. There were shouts from far away, from somewhere below. My family would wonder what I was doing. This was an acceptable form of showing off on an open-air walk that was going well, as long as I didn't take too long. They wouldn't immediately assume a problem, but they'd be worrying. I saw my mom's face, remembering her vow to kill Dad if anything went wrong. I didn't know what was going wrong, but something had definitely thrown me off balance. And that was the most dangerous thing that could happen, all the way up here with no way to be rescued. I had to get back under control. Maybe they'd believe I was just performing if I laid back, reclining on the wire, my one leg on it, the other dangling off. The pole I kept flat on my stomach. I closed my eyes and breathed. I opened them. Lazy clouds, more shouts, sirens in the distance. I had to get up. Except getting up from this position on this kind of wire with its slight sway, well, it was harder than the lying down had been. That was when I heard a voice shouting. It was Remy. Still far, but nearer than the others. My curiosity was strong enough to get me back into a sitting position. I let the bar find my balance for me, and I scanned down the tower. Oh no. He was climbing the ladder up to the second platform. There were more police down there, and the rest of the parade was barely visible, almost across the bridge. I had to get up. Remy looked at me then. We were too far from each other to make real eye contact, but he held up a hand. He called out, "You'll do this," and started climbing again. Well, of course I would do it. I was just taking a break, letting the wooziness pass. I brought my body into a crouch and drew my dangling foot back onto the wire. Then I straightened, rising dramatically, wishing there was a way to wave or flourish. But I couldn't risk releasing the pole with one hand to try. I needed it too much. The only way I could show how okay I was involved finishing this walk. So, one foot in front of another. My breathing found its rhythm again, my heart no longer a flutter in my chest. I held my head high and smiled, and I went on smooth, but not so smooth as before. Remy had made it onto the platform, and he had the nerve to look relieved. I heard him call down, "She's okay, it's okay." I wanted to hit him over the head with the pole. Of course, I was okay. Smooth and steady, steady and smooth, smiling, managing not to grit my teeth by willpower alone, and the platform was 2 feet away, then one, and then Remy's hands darted out over the pole, grabbed my waist, and lifted me onto it. Taking the pole from me, he put it down behind us. He clamped his hands onto my shoulders, holding on like he thought I might fall. It took me a moment to be able to speak. "What, in the name of Barnum, do you think you're doing?" He released one of my shoulders and reached behind me, messed with my hair even as I slapped his hand away. Before he could do anything else, I stood, straightening to my full height and folding forward into an elegant bow in case anyone was watching. The shouts and sirens below assured me there were plenty of watchers. I flourished my hand, happy not to be gripping the pole so tightly it felt it might break. I could never admit how close that had been. Remy said, "Look," and he held up something I didn't recognize right away. It was a long feather, a black eye at the end, and a fringe of bright colors along the shaft. A peacock feather. The one thing that was absolutely banned from a performer's costume as bad luck. The wind kicked up, plucked it from his hand, and we watched together as it twisted along the air currents to the river and vanished beneath the deep blue water. "You can thank me any time," he said.